Substance dualism and materialism are the two philosophical perspectives that attempt to explain the nature of the mind and its relationship with the physical world. Similarities: both substance dualism and materialism are the theories that seeks to explain the nature of consciousness and the relationship between the mind and the body. They both acknowledge the existence of the physical matter. Differences: substance dualism, often associated with the Rene Descartes, posits that there are two fundamental kinds of substance, mental and physical. The mind, or the soul, and the body are distinct entities, with the mind being non-physical and the body being physical. This view leaves room for the existence of the immaterial entity such as soul. However, a key challenge for dualism is explain how the non-physical mind interacts with the physical body. Materialism, on the other hand, asserts that everything that exists is physical, including the mind. It argues that mental state, decision, emotions, and consciousness can all be attributed to the physical process in the brain. This perspective is more straightforward, as it does not posit that existence of any non-physical. It aligns with the principles of evolution, which is based on the physical process. Substance dualism posits the existence of the both physical and non-physical substance. Materialism asserts that everything, including the mind, is physical. The main point of the contentions between these two views lies in the different explanations of the consciousness and the mind-body interactions. Dualism posits in the non-physical mind that interact with the physical body. Materialism attributes all mental phenomena to physical processes.
Monism, epiphenomenalism, and parallelism are philosophical theories that attempt to explain the relationship between the mind and the body. We go to monism. It is a belief that ultimately the mind and the brain are the same thing. It asserts that everything that exists is one substance. There are two basic types of monism. First, materialistic monism. It believes that only physical matter like the brain exists. Mental processes can be identified with purely physical process in the central nervous system. Next, phenomenalism. In other words, subject idealism. It believes that physical objects and events are reducible to mental objects, properties, and events. Ultimately, only mental objects in the mind are exist. Next, epiphenomenalism. It is a form of monism that posits that mental states or events are byproduct of states or events in the brain, necessarily caused by them but exercising no causality themselves. In other words, physical events can be induced mental events, but not vice versa. Parallelism. It is the theory that the mind and body function in a parallel manner in harmony, but do not interact with each other. This means that mental and physical events are independent of each other, but they correspond because they are both preordained by God. We go for their similarities. All three theories are attempts to explain the mind and body problem, which is the question of how the mind, which includes the mental processes, thoughts, and consciousness, relates to the body, which is physical aspects of the brain, and how the brain is structured. The differences. While monism asserts that the mind and body are of the same substance, epiphenomenalism and parallelism offer different perspectives on the interaction between the mind and the body. Epiphenomenalism posits that mental events are caused by physical events but have no causal effect themselves, while parallelism asserts that mental and physical events do not interact but run in parallel.
Occasionalism, interactionalism, functionalism, and universalism are philosophical theories that attempt to explain the relationship between the mind and the body. Occasionalism posits that all events are directly caused by God. The theory asserts that the mind and body do not interact directly. Instead, God meditates the interaction between the mind and the body. For example, when a person decides to pick up an apple, it is not the mind that causes the arm to move, but God, who causes the arm to move upon the occasion of the decision. Interactionalism, also known as dualism, posits that the mind and body are distinct entities that interact with each other. This theory asserts that mental states can cause physical states and vice versa. However, how this interaction occurs is the subject of debate among philosophers. Functionalism is a theory in philosophy of mind that posits that mental states are constituted solely by their functional rule. In other words, that what makes something a mental state depends not on its internal constitution, but on the way it functions or the role it plays in the system of which it is a part. Universalism. In the context of metaphysics, universalism is the idea that some properties are universal or apply to all things. This is contrasted with individualism, which holds that properties are tied to individual objects. Universalism is this sense is a claim about the structure of reality as a whole. Similarities. All four theories are attempts to explain the mind-body problem, which is the question of how the mind, mental processes, thoughts, and consciousness relates to the body, physical aspects of the brain, neurons, and how the brain is structured. Differences. While occasionalism posits that all events are caused directly by God, interactionalism asserts that the mind and body interact directly. Functionalism, on the other hand, posits that mental states are defined by their functional rule, not by their physical or metaphysical constitution. Universalism, meanwhile, is a broader metaphysical claim about the structure of reality and isn't specifically a theory of mind.
Go now to the principle of indiscernibles and verdurantism. It is two philosophical concepts that deal with identity and persistence, but they approach these topics from different angles. Principle of indiscernibles, which also known as Leibniz law. This principle states that if two entities are indistinguishable in terms of their properties, then they are identical. It is often associated with the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. The principle has two parts: the indiscernibility of identicals. If two entities are identical, they share the same properties, and the identity of indiscernibles. If two entities share the same properties, they are identical. This principle is more about metaphysical identity and doesn't directly address how objects persist over time. We go to verdurantism, also known as four-dimensionalism or worm theory. It is a theory of persistence and identity. It posits that all objects are four-dimensional entities that extend across space-time. According to verdurantism, an object persists over time by having different temporal parts at different times. This theory is more about how objects persist over time and doesn't directly address the issue of indiscernibility. What is the contrast? The principle of indiscernibles is primarily concerned with identity based on properties, while verdurantism is concerned with how objects persist over time. Verdurantism allows for change over time, as it considers an object to be a collection of temporal parts, whereas the principle of indiscernibles does not directly address change. We will discuss the similarities of the two. Both theories are concerned with the concept of identity, and both can be used to analyze and understand the nature of objects and their properties. Their differences. The principle of indissolubles faces challenges when dealing with identical particles in quantum mechanics, where particles can be indistinguishable but not identical. Verdurantism faces challenges in explaining our intuitive understanding of objects as three-dimensional entities persisting through time. Both theories deal with identity. They approach it different perspective and have their own unique challenges. They offer different insight into the nature of objects and their persistence over time.
Determinism and libertarianism are the two philosophical concepts that deal with the nature of the human actions and free will. Determinism holds that every event or action is the unavoidable result of the preceding events and actions. It argues that we are completely determined by external forces. Determinists believe that everything has a sufficient cause. Libertarianism, on the other hand, asserts that individuals possess unrestricted free will. It holds that humans make choices freely as independent, autonomous beings, unaffected by external forces. Similarities. Both determinism and libertarianism deals with the concept of free will and human actions. They both have implications from more responsibilities. Differences. Determinism claims that all events, including human actions, are ultimately determined by the cause external to the will. Libertarianism rejects this idea and posits that some actions are freely chosen, independent of deterministic laws. Comparisons. Determinism and libertarianism represent the two of the range in the free will debates. While determinism asserts the absence of the free will due to the external causes, libertarianism upholds the existence of the free will and our ability to act individually. Determinism can lead to the deterministic view of the universe, where if one knew a great deal about the state of the universe and the laws of the nature at the particular time, they could predict the state of the universe in the future. Libertarianism, however, adds the notion of the self equation before the desire, necessities, and actions. The self holds the final judgment of whatever to act or not.
Cause-determinism and self-determinism are two philosophical concepts that deal with the nature of human actions, free will, and determinism. Contrast, cause-determinism holds that every event or action is inevitable result of preceding events and actions. It argues that we are completely determined by external forces. Self-determinism, on the other hand, asserts that determinism and free will are compatible. It holds that humans make choices freely as independent, autonomous beings unaffected by external forces. Similarities. Both cause-determinism and self-determinism deal with the concept of free will and human actions. They both have implications for moral responsibility. Differences. Cause-determinism claims that all events, including human actions, are ultimately determined by causes external to the will. Self-determinism rejects this idea, posits that some actions are freely chosen, independent of intermistic laws. Comparisons. Cause-determinism and self-determinism represent two ends of a spectrum in the free will debate. While cause-determinism asserts that absence of free will due to external causes, self-determinism upholds an existence of free will and our ability to act independently. Cause-determinism can lead to the deterministic view of the universe, where if one knew a great deal about the state of the universe and the law of the nature at the particular time, they could predict the state of the universe in the future. Self-determinism, however, adds a notion of the self to equation before the desired necessities an action, the self holds and final judgment of whether to act or not. The concepts of a priori truth and analytic truth are often used to categorize different types of knowledge or propositions. Analytic truths are true by virtue of their meaning. They are propositions that are true or not true solely based on their meaning. Examples on analytic propositions in our Western philosophy discussion: all bachelors are unmarried, and all triangles have three sides. Many philosophers have held that a priori knowledge is restricted to such analytic truths. A priori truths are those that can be known independently of any experience. They are thought to be necessary and universal. Kant claimed that all mathematical judgments are both a priori and synthetic. Contrast: while analytic truths are true based on their meaning alone, a priori truths are those that can be known independently of any experience. Analytic truths are often considered a subset of a priori truths. Kant believed that not all a priori truths are analytic. Similarities: both analytic truths and a priori truths are considered necessary in the sense that they cannot be otherwise. Differences: basis of truth. Analytic truths are true by virtue of their meaning. They are true or not true solely based on the meaning of the words or phrases used. A priori truths, on the other hand, are those that can be known independently of any experience. They are not dependent on the meaning of the words or phrases.